Warning! What you're about to witness happened on August 14, 2025, at 04:02 hours Taiwan time. 6 Chinese nuclear attack submarines, armed with 72 heavyweight torpedoes and 36 anti-ship missiles, hunting 2 American Virginia-class submarines in the narrow waters of the Taiwan Strait. 180 miles of ocean, nowhere to hide, no escape routes, and 14 minutes of the most intense underwater combat since World War II that left the seafloor littered with wreckage from the deadliest submarine engagement in modern naval history. I'm your host at Navy Warfare, where we analyze the most brutal underwater battles that determine the fate of nations. Today's engagement will show you exactly how modern submarine warfare unfolds when stealth tactics fail, and 8 of the world's most advanced underwater killing machines are forced into close-quarters combat in water too shallow for traditional submarine evasion. And if you think submarine battles are slow-moving chess games, this story will prove that underwater warfare can be more violent and decisive than any surface naval engagement. August 14, 2025. The Taiwan Strait, midway between mainland China and Taiwan Island. 2 American submarines, the USS Vermont and USS Oregon, were conducting classified surveillance operations near Chinese military installations when People's Liberation Army Navy sonar stations detected their acoustic signatures and dispatched 6 Type 093 Shang-class nuclear attack submarines to intercept and destroy the American intruders. The tactical situation was unprecedented in modern submarine warfare. The Taiwan Strait averages only 180 meters in depth, barely deep enough for nuclear submarines to operate effectively, and far too shallow for the cat-and-mouse games that define typical submarine encounters. Both American and Chinese submarines were forced to operate in what submariners call the bathtub, confined waters where advanced sonar systems make stealth nearly impossible, and engagement ranges are measured in kilometers rather than tens of kilometers. The Chinese submarine commanders received direct orders from Beijing: eliminate the American submarines before they could transmit intelligence about Chinese invasion preparations to Pacific Fleet Command. The Americans had detected massive military buildup indicating imminent amphibious assault on Taiwan and were attempting to relay critical intelligence when 6 Chinese submarines began closing from multiple directions. At 04:08 hours, the USS Vermont's sonar operator detected the first Chinese submarine contact approaching from the northeast at high speed. Within 90 seconds, additional contacts appeared on sonar screens from 4 different compass bearings, indicating a coordinated attack by multiple Chinese submarines attempting to surround and destroy the American vessels before they could escape to deeper water. The American submarines faced a tactical nightmare, outnumbered 3-1 by enemy submarines in shallow water that eliminated most evasion options, while Chinese forces controlled every escape route to the open Pacific. The USS Oregon's commanding officer made the decision that would define the engagement. Instead of attempting to flee, both American submarines would fight their way out using superior weapons technology and crew training. But here's what made this battle different from every previous submarine engagement in naval history. The shallow water meant that torpedoes fired by any submarine could be detected and tracked by all other submarines in the area. Every weapon launch immediately revealed the firing submarine's position, while creating acoustic chaos that made sonar detection nearly impossible. The battle would be fought blind, with submarines launching weapons at targets they could barely track in an underwater environment filled with explosive detonations. Now here's a question that every Navy Warfare subscriber needs to consider. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is exactly why these submarine warfare scenarios are critical to understand, because they reveal how underwater combat unfolds when stealth advantages are eliminated. What would you do as the outnumbered American submarine commanders? Fight aggressively and risk quick destruction, or attempt evasion in shallow water where Chinese forces control all escape routes? Drop your tactical assessment in the comments below. At 04:10 hours, the Chinese submarines began their coordinated attack. The lead Type 093 launched 2 U-6 heavyweight torpedoes at the USS Vermont from a range of 8 kilometers. Extremely close range for submarine combat, but necessary due to the acoustic interference created by shallow water operations. The torpedoes, each carrying a 250-kilogram warhead, were programmed for wire-guided terminal attack to ensure accuracy, despite the challenging acoustic environment. The USS Vermont's torpedo defense systems immediately detected the incoming weapons and began launching acoustic countermeasures while the submarine executed emergency evasive maneuvers. But the shallow water-limited maneuvering options, the American submarine could dive no deeper than 150 meters and had less than 4 kilometers of maneuvering space before entering Chinese territorial waters where additional submarines were waiting. The first Chinese torpedo missed the USS Vermont by less than 50 meters, detonating against the seafloor and creating an underwater explosion that temporarily blinded all submarine sonar systems in the immediate area. The second torpedo's guidance system malfunctioned in the acoustic chaos, causing the weapon to circle back toward the Chinese submarine that had fired it, forcing the Chinese vessel to take emergency evasive action to avoid being destroyed by its own weapon. At 0411 hours, the USS Oregon launched 4 Mark 48 AD-cap torpedoes in a spread pattern targeting 3 different Chinese submarines. The American weapons, significantly more advanced than their Chinese counterparts, used sophisticated sonar algorithms to track multiple targets simultaneously, while avoiding mutual interference between torpedo guidance systems. 2 torpedoes targeted the Chinese submarine that had just attacked the USS Vermont, while the remaining weapons engaged separate Chinese vessels approaching from the northwest. The underwater battlefield became a chaos of torpedo wakes, explosion shock waves, and submarine emergency maneuvers as 8 nuclear submarines fought in water barely deep enough to contain them. Sonar operators reported acoustic conditions unlike anything in their training: multiple torpedo motors, cavitation from high-speed turns, and explosion reverberations created an underwater environment where traditional submarine warfare tactics became useless. The first American torpedo struck a Chinese Type 093 submarine in the forward torpedo compartment, causing a catastrophic explosion that broke the vessel in half and killed all 110 crew members instantly. The submarine's nuclear reactor automatically shut down, but the hull breach allowed seawater to flood critical systems before the crew could execute damage control procedures. For those following Navy warfare's analysis of modern submarine combat, this moment represents the brutal reality of underwater warfare when stealth advantages are eliminated. Unlike surface naval battles where ships can maneuver in 3 dimensions while maintaining visual contact with targets, submarine combat occurs in complete darkness, with ranges determined by acoustic sensors that can be defeated by environmental conditions or enemy countermeasures. The second American torpedo struck another Chinese submarine in the engine compartment, causing massive flooding but not immediate destruction. The damaged Chinese vessel attempted to surface while its crew fought to control flooding and maintain reactor cooling. However, surfacing during submarine combat makes any vessel vulnerable to torpedo attack from submerged opponents, a tactical decision that would prove fatal within minutes. At 0413 hours, the battle intensified as the remaining Chinese submarines launched a coordinated torpedo barrage against both American vessels. 12 heavyweight torpedoes were fired simultaneously, the largest torpedo salvo in submarine combat history. The Chinese commanders had decided to overwhelm American defensive systems through sheer volume of weapons rather than precision targeting. The USS Vermont faced 6 incoming torpedoes, while simultaneously engaging 2 Chinese submarines at close range. The submarine's automated defense systems launched every available countermeasure, while the crew executed combat maneuvering that pushed the nuclear submarine to its maximum design limits. Hull stress monitors indicated structural damage from the extreme maneuvers, but the alternative was certain destruction from multiple torpedo impacts. 3 Chinese torpedoes missed their targets due to countermeasure interference, but 2 weapons maintained target lock on the USS Vermont, despite defensive measures. The submarine's commanding officer made a decision that violated every principle of submarine safety protocols. Emergency surface while under torpedo attack to reduce target profile and allow use of surface weapon systems. The USS Vermont broke the surface of the Taiwan Strait while 2 Chinese torpedoes were still approaching at high speed. The submarine's crew had less than 30 seconds to fire surface-launched weapons before the pursuing torpedoes would force them to crash dive or face certain destruction. The American submarine launched 2 Harpoon anti-ship missiles at the Chinese submarine that had surfaced after being damaged earlier, then crash dive to avoid the incoming torpedoes. Both Harpoon missiles struck the surface Chinese submarine, causing explosions that could be seen for miles across the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese vessel broke apart and sank within minutes, taking its entire crew to the bottom. However, the USS Vermont's emergency surface had revealed its position to the remaining Chinese submarines, making the American vessel a priority target for every enemy submarine in the area. The USS Oregon, meanwhile, was engaged in close-quarters torpedo combat with 3 Chinese submarines in water so shallow that torpedo explosions created surface disturbances visible to aircraft. The American submarine fired its remaining torpedoes in a desperate attempt to break through the Chinese formation and reach deeper water, where traditional submarine tactics would provide better survival chances. At 04:14 hours, one of the USS Oregon's torpedoes struck a Chinese submarine directly beneath its sail structure, causing a catastrophic implosion that killed the entire crew instantly. The explosion was so violent that debris from the destroyed Chinese submarine damaged 2 other Chinese vessels, forcing them to surface with critical system failures and flooding throughout multiple compartments. But the American submarines were running out of weapons and options. The USS Vermont had expended all but 2 torpedoes while facing 3 remaining Chinese submarines. The USS Oregon had 1 torpedo remaining, while 2 damaged but still operational Chinese vessels continued their attack. The mathematical equation was simple. The Americans were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in shallow water with no escape routes. The Chinese submarine commanders coordinated their final attack, positioning their remaining vessels to create a triangular formation that would prevent American escape while guaranteeing that at least some Chinese torpedoes would find their targets. At 04:15 hours, the 3 operational Chinese submarines launched their final torpedo salvo. 8 weapons targeting both American submarines in a concentrated attack designed to end the engagement decisively. If you're interested in understanding how submarine commanders make life-or-death decisions under impossible tactical conditions, make sure you're subscribed to Navy Warfare with notifications enabled. And here's a tactical question for our submarine warfare community. Given what you now know about this engagement, could the American submarines have survived by using different tactics, or was their destruction inevitable once they were detected in shallow water? Your assessment could help other viewers understand the brutal mathematics of outnumbered submarine combat. The USS Vermont's final action saved both American submarines and changed the outcome of the entire engagement. Instead of attempting to evade the incoming Chinese torpedoes, the submarine's commanding officer ordered emergency ascent while launching the vessel's last 2 torpedoes at the nearest Chinese submarine from point-blank range. The American submarine surfaced directly in front of 4 Chinese torpedoes, while its own weapons were still traveling toward their target. The American torpedoes struck the Chinese submarine before the Chinese weapons could reach their target, causing an underwater explosion so massive that the shockwave disabled the guidance systems of all incoming Chinese torpedoes. The Chinese weapons lost target lock and detonated harmlessly against the seafloor, while the destroyed Chinese submarine created an underwater debris field that provided acoustic concealment for the surviving American vessels. The USS Oregon used the acoustic chaos created by the explosion to launch its final torpedo at the last operational Chinese submarine. The weapon struck its target in the reactor compartment, causing a nuclear reactor emergency shutdown and catastrophic flooding that forced the Chinese crew to abandon their vessel. The submarine sank with its nuclear reactor secured, but the crew survived to be rescued by Chinese surface vessels. The final Chinese submarine, damaged earlier in the engagement but still operational, attempted to ram the surfaced USS Vermont in a desperate kamikaze attack. However, the American submarine's surface-launched weapon systems were still functional, and the USS Vermont sank the attacking Chinese vessel with 20mm cannon fire at a range of less than 500 meters. At 04:16 hours, the Battle of Taiwan Strait ended with 6 Chinese submarines destroyed or disabled, and 2 American submarines damaged but operational. The seafloor of the Taiwan Strait was littered with wreckage from the most intense submarine engagement since World War II, while survivors from both sides struggled in the water waiting for rescue by surface vessels. The tactical analysis of the engagement revealed several critical aspects of modern submarine warfare that military planners had never previously observed in actual combat. First, shallow water submarine combat eliminates most traditional advantages of nuclear submarine technology, reducing sophisticated underwater warfare platforms to brutal close-quarters combat. Second, torpedo saturation attacks can overwhelm defensive systems, but also create acoustic conditions that make precision targeting nearly impossible for all combatants. The intelligence value of the engagement was unprecedented. Both American and Chinese submarine capabilities had been tested under actual combat conditions, revealing strengths and weaknesses that could only be observed during life-or-death engagements. The Americans had demonstrated superior torpedo accuracy and crew training, while the Chinese had shown coordinated attack capabilities and willingness to accept massive casualties to achieve tactical objectives. The casualty count was staggering by modern submarine warfare standards. Approximately 520 Chinese submarine crew members were killed during the engagement, while both American submarines suffered significant damage, but no crew fatalities. The disparity reflected superior American submarine design, weapons technology, and crew training, but also highlighted the devastating effectiveness of concentrated torpedo attacks in confined waters. The psychological impact on both Chinese and American submarine crews was profound. Submarine warfare had traditionally been conducted through patient stalking and precision attacks, rather than the brutal close-quarters combat that characterized the Taiwan Strait engagement. Crew members reported stress levels comparable to surface combat, with the added psychological pressure of fighting in an environment where escape was impossible and mistakes were immediately fatal. The strategic implications extended far beyond the immediate tactical engagement. Chinese submarine losses represented nearly 20% of their nuclear-attack submarine fleet destroyed in a single engagement, while the intelligence gathered about Chinese submarine capabilities and tactics provided American naval planners with invaluable data for future operations. However, the engagement also demonstrated Chinese willingness to accept massive casualties to achieve strategic objectives. The international reaction was immediate and unprecedented. The submarine battle had occurred in international waters during what both sides initially described as routine operations, but the scale and intensity of the engagement indicated preparation for broader conflict. Multiple nations demanded emergency United Nations Security Council meetings to address what appeared to be preparation for full-scale war between two nuclear powers. The technological lessons learned from the engagement influenced submarine design and tactics for both navies. American submarines received enhanced torpedo defense systems and shallow water maneuvering capability, while Chinese submarine doctrine was modified to emphasize coordination between multiple vessels rather than individual submarine capabilities. The environmental impact was equally significant. 6 nuclear submarines had been destroyed in a relatively small area, creating underwater debris fields and potential contamination from damaged nuclear reactors. Cleanup operations required months of coordinated international effort and established new protocols for managing submarine wreckage in environmentally sensitive areas. The crew rotation policies for submarine services were modified following the engagement. The psychological stress of close-quarters underwater combat required new training protocols and crew support systems that had never been necessary during the Cold War era of submarine warfare. The Battle of Taiwan Strait had proven that submarine combat could be as psychologically demanding as surface warfare. The weapons procurement implications were immediate and expensive. Both navies recognized that traditional submarine warfare assumptions about engagement ranges, weapons loadouts, and tactical procedures were inadequate for combat in confined waters near major population centers. New weapons systems and submarine designs were initiated to address the tactical lessons learned during the engagement. The diplomatic consequences continued for months following the engagement. Both governments initially denied that a submarine battle had occurred, but survivor testimony and wreckage recovery made concealment impossible. The incident became a focal point for international discussions about submarine warfare rules of engagement and conflict de-escalation procedures. The intelligence sharing between allied nations increased dramatically following the engagement. American allies in the Pacific region received detailed briefings about Chinese submarine capabilities and tactics observed during the battle, while Chinese allies were provided with information about American submarine performance under combat conditions. The training modifications implemented by both navies emphasized preparation for combat in confined waters where traditional submarine warfare advantages are eliminated. Simulator programs were updated to include scenarios based directly on the Taiwan Strait engagement, ensuring that future submarine crews would be prepared for the reality of close-quarters underwater combat. Before we close, let me ask our Navy warfare community, what other submarine warfare scenarios would you like us to analyze? Are you interested in submarine rescue operations under combat conditions, nuclear reactor emergency procedures during battle damage, or maybe some of the classified submarine warfare tactics that have been recently revealed? Drop your suggestions in the comments and let us know what aspects of underwater combat you want to understand better. The memorial services for the Chinese submarine crews killed in the engagement drew attention to the human cost of submarine warfare when diplomatic solutions fail. The average age of submarine crew members is under 30, meaning that hundreds of young sailors died during an engagement that lasted less than 15 minutes, but will influence naval warfare for decades. The ongoing analysis of wreckage recovered from the Taiwan Strait continues to provide intelligence agencies with detailed information about submarine construction methods, weapons systems, and crew procedures used by both navies. The battle essentially provided a live fire test of submarine warfare capabilities under the most challenging possible conditions. And remember, while this scenario is based on realistic submarine warfare capabilities, torpedo specifications, and underwater combat procedures, it represents a simulation of how such engagements might unfold based on actual submarine performance characteristics and tactical doctrine. The men and women who serve aboard submarines deserve our respect and appreciation for the unique dangers they face while operating the most complex weapons platforms ever constructed. That's Navy Warfare, bringing you the most detailed analysis of submarine warfare and scenarios that shape our world. Subscribe for more in-depth underwater combat breakdowns. And remember, in the modern submarine warfare environment, the difference between routine operations and deadly combat can be measured in seconds, and the crews who operate these underwater weapons platforms are among the most highly trained and courageous military personnel in any navy.